Oh, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Super excited to be back on YouTube with you guys. Took about 4 days off after Thanksgiving. Just wanted to take some time off during the holidays. And obviously, we took a big gut punch as New York Giants fans, but really excited to be back and talking about what I feel is the biggest New York Giants game we've had since 2016 against obviously the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs. I think that's how big this game is this week, and I'll give my full opinion on it throughout the video. But regardless, I am really, really excited to even have this opportunity as a New York Giants fan. And I know a lot of fans are going to be down in the dumps over the last 2 weeks, and they're going to say this team has no chance, and we'll see. I'm very excited to see how the New York Giants stack up against this Washington football team. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out over the course of the week, but I'll definitely be live all week. I'm going to be live with Bad Dog on the channel with the Talk of Giants show, probably on Friday or whatever day works for him. Obviously, we'll be live streaming the game. I'm going to be live with Entertainah. I'll probably have videos throughout the week. But obviously, last week left a gut punch 4 days ago against the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving. I'll also talk about what Brian Daboll had to say about the remainder of the season and just give my full opinion on everything. But let's circle back just to Thanksgiving because I didn't really do a recap video. I kind of talked with Bad Dog about it on his stream after the fact, and I ate leftovers on Thanksgiving, and I said to myself, I'm tired. We'll talk about the Giants next week once Sunday wraps up and we see, all the happenings around the league. We see how Washington does and everything else. But obviously that game left a bad taste in your mouth. The Giants had every opportunity in the first half to win that game. Everything broke their way, right? The Dallas Cowboys had 2 turnovers, really 3, if you include Mike McCarthy going for it on his own 40-yard line early in the game. And we had a narrow lead at halftime. I think we were up by 6 points. And then in the second half, we just got completely outcoached. We got completely destroyed. And obviously, a lot of our blemishes showed up. We knew going into that game we were really beat up with injuries. And the Dallas Cowboys just had a much better football team. And it showed in the second half. And they dominated us throughout the second half. And a lot of people point to the referees. There were certainly some questionable calls. But at the end of the day, the better football team won. I think most Giant fans going into that game didn't think we were going to have much of a chance. Due to the fact that we were completely banged up, due to the fact that Dallas right now is just a better football team. They were playing very well going into that game, and the Giants just didn't match up in the second half. They were outmanned. They were outgunned. You call it whatever you want to call it. And yeah, obviously we had some unfortunate injuries leading up into that game. Without Adoree Jackson in the game, obviously, without McKinney, we knew it was going to be tough going into that game to win that contest, and it's going to be tough going forward to win a lot of these contests. But this week, there is not a bigger game probably on the remainder of the schedule, and I'll explain my exact thought process as to why. But for me, this is it. This is put up or shut up time for this New York Giants football team. And it's not just for the playoffs. It may very well be put up or shut up time for some of the players that are on this roster that may be up for contracts next year. And I don't know that. I'm not a fortune teller, but Joe Schoen talked about how he wants to evaluate these players. This is where you evaluate these players in situations like this. How do they show up? How does Saquon Barkley show up for this football game? How does Daniel Jones show up for this football game? How does Julian Love show up for this football game? All these guys that are free agents next year, guys that are looking for contract extensions, Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, so on and so forth. This is put up or shut up time. And the Giants, if you look at their schedule, if you look at the standings right now in the NFC, as poor as they may have looked against the Detroit Lions, as poor as they may have looked against the Dallas Cowboys, they have a golden opportunity to control their own destiny to go to the playoffs. And I said it before the year started. If you're Daniel Jones, that has to be your mission. If you want to return as the New York Giants quarterback, you have to make the playoffs, because by making the playoffs, obviously you and the team show growth, but even more importantly, you put Joe Schoen in a position where he can't really draft a quarterback. Okay, and I suppose he can, but he has to really be in love with that quarterback, especially with all the quarterback-needy teams. If you miss the playoffs and go on a 7-game, 8-game losing streak to close out the year, that could change things drastically. So this is by far the most important game in Daniel Jones' career. It is by far the most important game in Saquon Barkley's career. We heard at the trade deadline that Saquon Barkley and Joe Schoen were trying to work out a contract. They couldn't really come to a full agreement. They didn't come to terms in terms of, where they met, where Joe Schoen valued him, where he valued himself. And the last 2 weeks, whether it's his fault or not, a lot of people have started to come down on Saquon Barkley. And he has not had his best performances since that 35-carry game. Is he worn down? That remains to be seen. Hopefully he gets Daniel Bellinger back this week. Hopefully he gets Evan Neal back this week. And you see Saquon Barkley with a little bit of added rest, now that he's had 11 days off, get to go up against this Washington team and turn on the Jets, because we're going to need him if we're going to win this game. But if Saquon Barkley wants to get paid big, he's going to have to finish the year strong. He knows that. Daniel Jones knows that. And there is not a bigger game on the schedule, in my opinion, remaining than this one, at least at this point in time. But let's jump into the quote from Brian Daboll. I wanted to touch on that a bit because I liked hearing this as a Giants fan. This coming out from Kayvon Thibodeau when asked about it from the press. Kayvon Thibodeau said Brian Daboll's theme is the season starts now. Thibodeau said mentors like Strahan, Banks, and Armstead had a similar message. This is where the big guys step up. And he's absolutely right. And if you want to get big paydays, you got to step up in the big moments. And this is a playoff game as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of fans will say you can't call it a playoff game. To which I'll say I understand where you're coming from. We got 5 more games after this. The Giants could still go 2-3, 3-2, I should say, the remainder of their games after this to make the playoffs. But when you look at their schedule, I think we could all agree they need to split with Washington. And if you're being honest with yourself, which game do we have a better chance of winning? The game in which Washington hasn't quite hit their bye yet, the game in which we're at home, the game in which we've had 4 extra days to prepare, or the second time we play Washington when they've had a bye, they haven't played anyone but us the previous week, and they've had a whole another week to prepare for us where we go up against the Philadelphia Eagles. My answer to you is 100% this week. Now, obviously, I want the New York Giants to sweep Washington. That's our ticket to the playoffs as far as I'm concerned. That's our easiest path to the playoffs. But you have to win the first one to get to the second one. And to me, this is kind of like a tennis match. We're on serve right now. We're at home. Washington is running on fumes. They have not had their bye quite yet. They didn't look very good last week. Marcus Mariota and, in my opinion, a very mediocre Atlanta Falcons team, had they not tried to pull a Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson, would have beaten Washington. I believe that was on the road. I think it was in Washington. They would have beaten them. I don't think Atlanta's a very good football team. And I do think the New York Giants stack up pretty well, especially with some of the reinforcements we're getting. We have to hold serve. We have to win this game. And then we'll try to steal serve in 2 weeks when we go to Washington. But you worry about that when you get there. But if the Giants lose this game, I got to be honest with you guys. I don't think we're going to the playoffs. This game is a must-win game. If you win this game, it changes everything. You go into Philadelphia, you feel a little bit, a little looser. If you lose that game, whatever, you regroup and you have an opportunity to make the playoffs. If we sweep Washington, we're going to the playoffs. But if we lose this week, suddenly you're staring at 7-5 going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. You're probably going to 7-6 there if you're being honest with yourself. And then you're facing a well-rested Washington team that just beat you at home, and you have lost 4 straight. So that's when you're at the point of a fan where you're worried that the season could tumble completely out of control. The Giants have lost 2 straight. They have to put a stop to it this week. And I am super, super excited for a fan. I can't wait to talk about it with you guys all week. And I'm not discounting Washington. They're playing very well. I think they've won 5 out of their last 6. Their only loss came against Minnesota, in which it was a narrow defeat. They beat Philadelphia, and they beat them in the same method that the New York Giants have been able to beat football teams. Brian Robertson is a hard-nosed runner. He certainly looked a lot better last week, had his first 100-yard game. And they've got good weapons in the passing game. Something that we got to worry about, right? Because we're not the strongest at the cornerback position. From a good news standpoint, at least it looks like it's trending towards the Giants are going to have Azeez Ojulari back. And if they do, and we'll see, you're going to have, for the first time all year, you're going to have all 4 pass rushers on the team at once. Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence. And the way that Kayvon looked last week, to me, was his best performance by far as a pro. If you pair him with a returning Azeez Ojulari, the Giants defense suddenly might be able to do some damage against this Washington team, but they certainly present some challenges on the offensive end. They have a pretty strong defense. I'm not taking this opponent lightly. But if the Giants can't beat Washington, and I saw a lot of people on Twitter complaining about it this week, when Marcus Mariota pulled to Russell Wilson in the Super Bowl, we don't deserve to make the playoffs. We don't belong in the playoffs. If you can't beat Washington, you're not going to beat any of the playoff teams. Period. End of story. So, to me, this is a good barometer. I think this is a team that's at least fairly comparable to us in terms of talent. I think a lot of the factors that I mentioned benefit us. The fact we've had 4 extra days to prepare, the factor that we're at home, the fact that Washington hasn't hit their bye yet. This is their now 12th straight week without a bye. You have to figure they're a little bit, running on fumes, so on and so forth. The fact that it's at home, I think the Giants should win this football game. And if they win it, they control their own destiny going into Washington, no matter what happens in that Philadelphia Eagles game. If we sweep Washington, if you look at the standings, we're going to the playoffs. We could lose the rest of our games, go 9-8, and we're going to go to the playoffs. I'm not saying I want that to happen, but that is just a fact. Now, I suppose something crazy could happen. Washington could win completely outside of our matchup, but I don't really see that happening, especially if we sweep them. So if we sweep Washington, we're going to the playoffs. But to sweep them, you got to win the first game first. And the first game's at home. The first game should be, on paper, the easier game to win. Giants have to get back to their roots. The Giants have to get back to their identity. And I need Daniel Jones to show up. I want Daniel Jones to be the quarterback in 2023. I want Saquon Barkley to be back with the New York Giants in 2023 because I don't want to completely have to knock this thing down. I want to keep building this football team. And if Daniel Jones doesn't take that big leap in 2023, maybe then with a better supporting cast, maybe that's when you make your move at the quarterback position. But in an ideal world, I want these guys to be back. I want them to continue filling the other holes along this roster. But in order for that to happen, or at least in order for that to be the best possibility of happening, the New York Giants have to win some of these football games. And at this point in time, I believe the New York Giants have to make the playoffs. And I also think it would be incredibly valuable, not just for Daniel Jones, not just for Saquon Barkley, but this entire football team, if they do get some playoff experience, regardless of what happens in that game. You don't think that experience helped the Philadelphia Eagles going into this year, making the playoffs, just having a little bit of a taste of a playoff game? I think it certainly did. You don't think it helped Eli Manning in 2005 to get a taste of the playoffs, for that team to get a taste of the playoffs with Eli Manning as their quarterback? I think it certainly did. So I think it would be valuable. And I think just having games like this week is incredibly valuable for a young team, for a young, inexperienced coach. That's another thing I want to talk about. I need to see this coaching staff this week show confidence in their players. And I'm not saying they haven't. And I think they have for the most part this year. I think Brian Daboll definitely has. But I didn't like the feeling I got last week with about 8 minutes left in that contest when the New York Giants were down by 2 scores, when they were huddling up with 8 minutes left. They were chewing up 30 seconds on the clock. It almost felt like they were up by 15 points rather than being down by 15 points. I want them to let loose because their careers, as Giants at least, could depend on it. I want them to give Daniel Jones the ability and the opportunity to decide whether or not we win this football game. And I understand that you have to operate from within the strengths of the offense. I'm not saying that Daniel Jones needs to go out there and throw the ball 40 times. But when the opportunities are there, I need to see Daniel Jones take some shots down the field. But most importantly, I need to see Jones do what he was doing earlier on in the year. In a big third down situation, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 12, in certain spots, you need to pick it up. I could have a 190-yard performance from you, but you need to come up big in big moments in this game. Something you were able to do against Green Bay, something that you were able to do against the Baltimore Ravens. That's what we need in this game to win. And I think if the New York Giants are able to do that, they will come out victorious. And then you're only going to get more and more valuable experience. Suddenly, that next game against the Eagles is huge. The next game against Washington is huge. But if the Giants lose this game, things could tumble out of control real quick. The pressure is on. Like Brian Daboll said, it's a completely new season. And as a fan, I am so excited about it. I understand that a lot of fans may be falling off the bandwagon. A lot of fans may feel like this team is spiraling out of control. They're not a playoff team. You know, there are probably even some certain fans that are hoping we lose out so we get a better draft pick. Not this fan. At this point in time, probably the best you're going to be picking is 12th or 13th anyway. Make the playoffs, get some valuable experience, and put your name in the hat. See what can happen. You never know. It's why they play the games. Nobody thought the Cincinnati Bengals were going to the Super Bowl last year. So we'll see how the rest of the season plays out. But I'm super excited to see what Daniel Jones, what Saquon Barkley, what this team, what Brian Daboll is made of this week. Because I think this is a fairly comparable opponent. I don't care how good they've looked over the last 6 weeks. Because of all the things I said, because of the way Washington looked last week, I see no reason at home why the New York Giants can't win this football game. We have to do what we've done good all year. Don't make mistakes. Don't make mistakes. Play fundamentally sound football, and you should be able to get out of MetLife, at least in my opinion, with a win against Washington and get yourself to 8-4 and give yourself an opportunity, regardless of what happens against the Philadelphia Eagles, to make the playoffs the following week in Washington. And how good would that feel? This is a playoff game, ladies and gentlemen. This is backs against the wall, and I need to see what Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, Brian Daboll, and the rest of this team is made out of. We're going to find out in 7 short days, and I can't wait. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.